what would it be like if you had this in the middle of this other thing that I did know, where maybe a love like that is difficult because you're constantly worried about where your next piece of bread is coming from. But what if you were starving and still in love? That was for me the kind of the entrance.
That is mostly the magic of your books, because it's a story that even in the war, even in that awful reality that they were living, they were still having time and spirit of being in love. So I think that's like this contrast that we have, that we're seeing at this awful reality, but we're seeing this great love story, and it's very engaging.
Thank you. It is. Well, this is the thing that was appealing to me about it. I basically wanted to write the story of a heroic man and of a girl who doesn't know her own strength, doesn't know her own power, and yet is suddenly thrown into this thing that most of us can't even imagine living through, and has to get it and has to survive through that. And what makes her survive? Well, it's her, brand new feeling, her brand new love for this man. And so that was the thing that was appealing to me.
Hola a todos, soy Cristi Mesta
y yo soy Fabiola Ramírez.
Les damos la bienvenida a En la misma página, un podcast en el cual vamos a comentar y desglosar todo tipo de libros.
Somos dos personas que disfrutamos de la lectura y nos encanta explorar diferentes puntos de vista.
Acompáñenos en cada episodio a disfrutar de las reseñas y aprendizajes que cada lectura nos va dejando.
Spoiler alert, este episodio puede echarte a perder el final del libro.
Que lo disfruten. Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a un episodio más de En la misma página. Hoy estamos súper felices porque vamos a tener ahorita con nosotros a la autora de esta saga de libros que se llama The Bronze Horseman. Empieza con ese, es el primero. Y luego sigue Tatiana Ann Alexander. Y luego sigue The Summer Garden. Es una saga de 3 libros. ¿Hay versiones en español?
Sí.
¿Sí hay?
El Caballero de Bronce, Tatiana Ann Alexander, y El Jardín de
verano.
De invierno, o de verano.
Summer Garden.
Sí,
se ve. Es una saga buenísima. El contexto histórico empieza en Rusia. El primer libro empieza en Rusia cuando Hitler acaba de invadir Rusia, y es esa historia de amor como en medio de la guerra, en medio de el hambre, en medio del frío, en medio de toda la devastación de la guerra. Esta historia de amor que está espectacular.
De hecho, es mucha gente que le saca la vuelta estar leyendo lo de la guerra y así. Dicen, gana más la historia de amor.
Sí.
O sea, pesa mucho. Y sí te están dando el contexto histórico, obviamente, muy bien documentado, súper bien documentado. Aprendí muchísimo. Todo está muy real, todo está muy exacto, con demasiados facts que pasan. Pero la historia de amor está impresionante. No
espectacular.
Puedes dejar. Sí.
De hecho, bueno, el primer libro es un espectáculo de verdad. En el segundo, yo batallé un poco más porque la historia de amor se frena un poquito porque están separados. O sea, uno está en la guerra,
medio de la guerra.
Y la otra está en Estados Unidos. Y batallé un poco más porque me faltaba eso. O sea, me faltaba que me compensara un poquito el sufrimiento. Sí. Es que el libro sí está muy, como dices tú, muy bien documentado, muy gráfico de lo que fue esa guerra.
Súper real.
Muy real. Y sí necesitas así como que un dulcecito para vivirlo, ¿no?
Me fui el fin de semana a un rancho y ahí había varias amigas y les dije, adivinen que voy a entrevistar a la autora de Paullina Alexander, Horseman. Como que quería nada más tener ciertas preguntas preparadas y éramos 5, 3 es tipo, mi mejor libro, es el mejor, sí. No sé qué, es viejo, no es nuevo, salió en el 2001, o en el 2000, sí, en el 2000. ya tiene tiempo.
Sí.
Yo lo leí en pandemia.
Yo también.
Yo lo leí en pandemia, me aventé y el primero es 850 páginas.
Sí, son larguísimos.
Son largas. Y luego el segundo y el tercero ya es como una continuación a esta historia, para mi gusto muy necesaria, o sea, sí lean la saga.
Sí.
Pero con el primero tienen para enamorarse, o sea,
Sí.
el primero está espectacular.
No, cuando terminas el primero no puedes parar.
No puedes parar,
Es
claro
un
que no.
espectáculo. Y está spicy, así como me gusta a
Sí,
mí.
está spicy, leve,
Sí.
porque, o sea...
No es,
No, para nada.
Pero
Ajá.
sí está spicy.
Está spicy, sí,
Ajá.
está spicy. La dosis perfecta.
Sí, está muy bien la dosis.
Pero también te da mucho sufrimiento porque empiezas a sentir cuando están en la guerra, cuando estalla la guerra, los mismos personajes te dicen, cuando vienen a la información, porque toda la información estaba muy como dosificada, ¿verdad? No les decían la verdad, que ahorita Leningrado es San Petersburgo, entonces la gente que vivía ahí no sabía realmente y habían tenido una que otra batalla en Finlandia y que no sé qué, pero cortitas, chiquitas, y ellos salían victoriosos. Decían, no, hombre, ahorita en verano están ahí Hitler metiéndose al territorio de nosotros, pero para diciembre se acaba. O sea, sí realmente creían que iba a ser una guerra muy corta y que los rusos iban a ganar luego. Y cuando no se prepara la gente y cuando empiezan a hacerles este tipo pues como que el territorio lo empiezan a aislar para que no les llegara la comida y no tuvieran estos, ¿verdad?, víveres, la gente se empieza a morir de hambre y de frío, porque no estaba preparado la ciudad. Era un frío que cuando te lo describe la autora, te dice los cuerpos congelados. O sea, pasó
terrible.
de verdad, ¿sabes?
Era
O sea, como
terrible.
que todo esto sucedió. Los cuerpos congelados en la calle, muriéndose. La gente no se salía de la ciudad, pensaban que iba a estar más seguro ahí. Realmente toda esta historia sí te la platican. Por eso necesitas...
Por eso esta es la otra parte. Que te aliviane.
Claro.
Porque si no es puro sufrir.
Es puro sufrir.
Yo en el segundo sufrí un poquito más. Y el tercero, no les quiero decir spoilers porque para que lo lean.
Vale la pena.
Vale la pena. En el tercer libro, lo que me gustó, que ahorita no le comentamos con la autora, es... me gustó que no es un... O sea, no es como un tipo, ay, bueno, ya todo bien. O sea, el tercero te muestra como la realidad de la vida de una pareja.
Claro.
O sea, las cosas buenas, las cosas malas, las subidas, las
¿Cómo
bajadas.
adaptarte?
Cómo adaptarte. O sea, todo lo que ellos batallan en volverse a adaptar después de una guerra. O sea, todo lo que traen cargando.
Y es parte de que el primer libro ves el enamoramiento y luego después ves los sacrificios que se hacen ellos por amor.
Y lo real.
Y lo real.
El amor real.
Exacto.
Entonces, tampoco es como que el tercero es ya todo bien, ya, o sea, no, o sea, también es como todo este acoplamiento que necesitan tener ellos dos después de haber pasado aparte tanto tiempo separados y volver a estar juntos y volver a acoplar, o sea, porque él batalla mucho en acoplarse a después de la guerra, todo lo que vivió y todo, entonces ella como en perseverar en el amor, lo importante es estar juntos, me gustó, o sea, también eso está real.
Yo este libro lo recomiendo, mucha gente me dice, ay, quiero un libro que me recomiendes de la segunda, o sea, no de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, que diga novela histórica, y se lo recomiendo muchísimo. Obviamente, sí les digo, oye, pues a veces está pesado. En pandemia, mi cuñada, por ejemplo, me dijo, no pude, me estaba volviendo loca, no era el momento para leerlo. Ahorita realmente sí te puedes decir, hijo, hay guerra ahorita, y puedes estar pensando y empatizando con la situación que a lo mejor puede ser difícil, no lo dudo, pero es una novela tan bien hecha. Sí. Me encanta, la recomiendo muy seguido, es de mis favoritos, los tengo en mis top 10. Y ahorita que lo releí, y dije, ay, sí está buenísimo, buenísimo.
Librazos y super saga, la verdad.
Super saga, totalmente. Y me da risa que de hecho se lo comentamos a la autora, es de esos libros que te va a llevar a Google a investigar.
Como siempre decimos, un buen libro es el que te hace googlear, investigar y a ver qué tanto es real y qué tanto pasó. Es uno de esos libros. Buenísimo.
Buenísimo.
Muy recomendable. Y bueno, aquí les dejamos la entrevista con la autora que nos encantó a las dos. Súper sencilla ella, muy fácil en su trato.
Tiene muchos libros, aparte de esta saga, tiene muchos otros libros. Unos son independientes, tiene otra saga también, tiene cuentos.
Oye, yo no he leído ese que le dijiste ahorita, ¿cómo se llama? The
Girl in Times Square. Fíjate que ese no lo recomiendo mucho, Cristina. No, está increíble el libro. Me llegó muy fuerte. O sea, me tardé mucho en superar ese libro porque hay unas situaciones como que muy personales estaba viviendo en ese momento. Entonces, Sí, entonces ese libro
te pudo.
Me pudo muchísimo y como que de repente, de esas veces que te sacuden el mundo y dices, ¿por qué estoy leyendo esto?
Pero está bueno.
Sí, está muy bueno. Es totalmente diferente, es en Times Square, es una...
¿En qué época ahorita?
Ahorita, no, sí, es actual, realmente no hay un periodo de tiempo específico. Sucede que su mejor amiga está missing, está tipo de repente está desaparecida, no entienden qué pasa, ella ni cuenta. Ella tiene muy mala relación con la mamá que vive en Hawái, tiene muy buena relación con sus hermanos, con su hermano sobre todo, su mayor, que es político y como que le resuelve todo. Ella se siente muy sola, no sé qué sucede, como que corta con un novio, no sé qué pasa, que se va a pasar unos días con la mamá a Hawái, o la mamá era alcohólica. Mira, no me acuerdo si la mamá era alcohólica y como que tenía que ir allá a Hawái a resolver situaciones, ella se va, todo esto que te estoy platicando pasa en los primeros 5 hojas, tipo, se va a Hawái. Y en eso llegan la policía a ver dónde está la amiga. Entonces, como ella no está, de alguna manera empieza a ser semisospechosa de que, a ver, ¿dónde está? ¿Por qué te fuiste? Total, ella regresa y el capitancito, el detective que trae el caso, hazte cuenta de que, ¿dónde estabas? No sé qué. Y a ver, ¿qué? Yo estoy en Hawái, ¿cómo que mi amiga no está? No sé qué. Y empieza una investigación de saber qué pasó con la amiga, que te tiene enganchada con este misterio, y empieza otra situación con el detective y ella, ¿me explico? Pero la historia de amor de ellos es una historia muy cruda, muy real, muy fuerte. Ella se enferma, está complicado, y luego entonces el hermano tiene algo que ver, y luego la mamá regresa, perdón porque estaba allá agarrando fiestas. Entonces es un libro, un standalone que le llaman, muy bueno. Pero la enfermedad de ella la platican muy descriptiva, muy gráfico, todo lo que le dolía, todo, cómo vomitaba, cómo no quería comer, los ánimos, ups and downs. Y dije, ¿qué pasó? Me dio una revolcada. Sí, me dio una revolcada. Dije, y pocas veces lo recomiendo por lo mismo, porque es un tema más fuerte que la guerra. Ya. Es un tema más personal que digo, ay, no, ¿para qué? O sea, mejor lean de la guerra. Ya, sabes, de los nazis. Bueno. Están más lejos esos. Pero
bueno, pues aquí les vamos a dejar la entrevista con Paullina Simons. Y pasa lo máximo, gozamos. Esperemos que les guste. Well, thank you very much for having us and for being in our podcast. We're great fans of you.
It is my great pleasure to be here.
We loved your books, and we love Tatiana and Alexander love story, and all the historic context that the story is written in, right?
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. When I first read this book, it was what they're calling right now my Roman Empire. I cannot forget about the characters, the love story. I was very impressed how many details you put into that. I felt what the characters were feeling. And somehow I couldn't put it off. Like I had to read another page, just a few more pages, and another
very
chapter.
Engaging.
It was very engaging. And I was immersed very much in the love story. But also, there's a lot of context of the things that really happened in Leningrad, and also in the US, and also in Germany, and also around the world. How could you manage to do that?
Yes, well, in the beginning, again, this book meant a tremendous amount to me because clearly, I myself was born and raised in Russia, and my family had lived through the World War, and it lived through the siege of Leningrad. And so when I was thinking about writing it, it was very important that I would get those little details that you talk about right, because that's what would make the book real. I knew for readers and for myself and also for my family. Having said that, my family, of course, to the end of their days was incredibly critical because all those little details that we all liked, they thought that I got wrong. I didn't do this right, or I didn't mention this, or they never had tomatoes in the villages, or they never had white bread, or they never, so the Russians can be very critical. But in any case, it was very important to me that I write that story of these two people in the setting that was real, because like people like you in Mexico, but also people in Australia, they just have no idea about this world from which we came. And to make that real, really required sort of that presence on the page and inside the characters. So I'm really happy that that came across as well.
And now knowing that you were from that part of the world, in that, maybe not in those years, but maybe your family was, is this sometimes a true story in such ways that you can write about what happened in true life?
Yes, well, so all the details, the apartment, Leningrad, how Hitler came into Russia, what happened to Leningrad during that time, the the village, the travel by train, the fighting, sort of, and so all the political stuff. That's as true as I can make it. I mean, clearly there might be some things that are fictionalized, but it is for the most part completely true. But the story itself of this larger than life love, I sort of kind of fantasized, I guess, about, like, what would it be like if you had this in the middle of this other thing that I did know, where maybe a love like that is difficult because you're constantly worried about where your next piece of bread is coming from. But what if you were starving and still in love? That was for me the kind of the entrance.
That is mostly the magic of your books, because it's a story that even in the war, even in that awful reality that they were living, they were still having time and spirit of being in love. So I think that's like this contrast that we have, that we're seeing at this awful reality, but we're seeing this great love story, and it's very engaging.
Thank you. It is. Well, this is the thing that was appealing to me about it. I basically wanted to write the story of a heroic man and of a girl who doesn't know her own strength, doesn't know her own power, and yet is suddenly thrown into this thing that most of us can't even imagine living through, and has to get it and has to survive through that. And what makes her survive? Well, it's her brand new feeling, her brand new love for this man. And so that was the thing that was appealing to me.
You can see throughout this saga that food, it's a very important topic. For one, you have starvation. People are starving. There's scarcity. The ratios are less and less, and they started to eat the wallpaper. They were starving. But on the other hand, you have this Tatiana who knows how to cook, and she has new recipes. And for somehow you can see food as a hope, and also as a way of, I don't know, punishing humanity. So it's a contrast that food is very important.
Yes, and that's a really good observation. And I think when you were saying that, I realized that I wonder if the countries in which the book is the most popular are the countries where food, like for the Russian people, is sort of a sacred thing. So when you take the food away, people who love food understand that, because one of the countries in which the Bronze Horseman specifically is very popular is Italy. Well, the Italians, they really do love their food, right? They and they certainly understand what it would be like to be deprived of it. So I definitely agree with you that
in Mexico, it's really important, the food. It's where the family gathers.
Absolutely.
The celebrations, when you're happy, when you're sad, everything revolves around food.
Absolutely. Argentina, Brazil also, because I have some readers from there who talk to me about this very thing, about how they just really felt that deprivation. And I know that food is very important to them also. So I just think that that's very interesting. Yes. Because if you don't care about food, then well, I
know.
guess if you're only eating some, salt-free things, right, or whatever, then maybe it doesn't really matter if food is taken away. But when you love food, and also food is, why is it a sacred thing? Because it's the thing that unites us, right? Like usually if you live by yourself, it's rare that you would cook food. You cook food for other people because you cook it as a labor of love. And so you sit down around a table, which is community, right? Which is the thing that unites us. You spend time with your family. So the bonds between you and the people that you love are all around a full table. Yes, a table laden with food. So when you take that away, you're really taking away like the soul of the people.
Sure.
I really find it very, and also unless you've lived with that kind of deprivation, most people just don't understand it. Like, I mean, people have suffered through war. The United States, of course, also had war. But when I write about World War II from the American point of view, I recognized, to my shock, to my surprise, how little of it had to do with food. Even during the Great Depression and during the war, there was rationing, right? But there was still always food. Meat was available, butter was available, milk. There was food. They could get bread. It wasn't like, oh my God, where are we going to eat? They might not have had as much sugar, maybe, or sweets, maybe that sort of things. But they had alcohol, and they had
Sure.
food.
It was a little bit more abundant.
Yes, absolutely.
And
even in England, yeah.
And also chocolate was like a luxury, and
yes,
and spices, and when you get something else that not a potato, they really are amazed, and you take it for granted. When we were reading it, we take for granted that we have available whatever vegetables we need in most part of the world, of course.
In most part of the world, absolutely. But even in countries that might not have, say, as many comforts or many conveniences as some other countries, food is still sort of central to your being. When food is taken away, no matter where you are, it's a real punishment. It's a real sort of subtraction from life. It's very hard to enjoy anything else in life when you don't have this thing that you think is basic, but it's fundamental,
Exactly. And also I see not as the same as the food, but there's also a big topic around the art. Like at the beginning, it was very hopeful when you see this creator making sure the art was safe. And there's a way, there's a passage that she asks, is it better to have saved the art than a human being? And he said like the art, it's a little bit more helpful and hopeful after the war. Who is gonna talk about it? Who is gonna say these stories? It's throughout art. And when I read, and I really like the story, most of the time I always Google. I always go to Google and see the streets, the hotel they were building, and how was Leningrad. I have never been there, and the statue. And I noticed that it was a big deal. The museum in Leningrad, there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of pictures that people were defending the art and the museum. It was really interesting to find out that.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that is true. Like, when during war, it's when a museum is destroyed or something beautiful that is built by humans that is destroyed. That's always even a greater outrage. Yes, in war you could kill people. That's almost expected. But my God, never destroy the museum.
I know.
It's odd when you think about it, because clearly without people there is no art. But the art is the thing that has that feeling of immortality, that thing that later on, now we're gone, the art is still going to remain. People are very, 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 they feel very strongly, just generally as human beings, about art.
And thanks to that, we still have them, because if not, they would have been destroyed.
They would have
right?
been destroyed. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
was
mean,
that... Sorry,
yeah.
sorry, I will interrupt.
Well, no, I just wanted to say, because I was just thinking about how in London in World War II, the Germans destroyed the the street near St. Paul's Cathedral, which housed all the first edition books that had ever been published in history. It had the street called Paternoster Row was just completely gone, and all of those books were gone. Like, they couldn't save them. I think they maybe didn't imagine that that it would be destroyed, but it was just burned as if it never existed. And that those 500,000 volumes of first edition books, the rarest of the rare books, was all destroyed. And I just, some of that was, the outrage about that was also quite great for the British against the Germans,
And for humanity as well. It's a loss for humanity. All the
Yes,
culture, all the...
tremendous.
And did you took the Bronze Horseman poem as an inspiration, or afterwards you wanted to add it to the love story? Because it's really important, the poem.
So from the beginning, that for me was the entry into the story, I guess. That's what I thought was the strongest part. So I began with that. I wanted to call it that because I knew the poem quite well, and I knew that the poem was about sacrifice. So even before I had the story, I had the title of the book. I like to usually have a title of my book even before I begin reading, because the title is something that it's like a goal. It's like you write towards it, right? So, like, if you call a book Tully, which was my first book, you know that the story is going to be about that girl, right? It's not going to be about Kansas, and it's not going to be about social work or whatever else, right? It's going to be about that. So when you write a book called The Bronze Horseman, you just know that it's going to have meaning in your story. So that's sort of like very important to me. So I knew that it was going to be that, even before I wrote even the first chapter.
And did you know that there were going to be 3 books in the saga, or
No,
that just happened?
So not only did I not know, but when I finished The Bronze Horseman, I finished it as one book, which is one of the reasons why that book on every page has so much heartbreak in it, because I really did think that the end of The Bronze Horseman was going to be the end of their story. There was going to be no more. And when you write, so this is what it is. So I had a different end in mind when I wrote the entire book, because I think if I had thought that there was going to be 3 more books, or 2 more books rather, it probably would not have had as much that feeling of this is all we've got, and there's going to be no more. And so everything that happens is just like filled with tears. Even the joy is filled with tears, because you know that it's going to go and it's never going to come again. And it's only after I finished it. And it wasn't even me. It was really my husband who, when he read the last pages, he was like, oh my God, no, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. Because originally I had an epilogue, a 6-page epilogue to sort of The Bronze Horseman ends, and then you turn a page, and then there's the epilogue. And in the epilogue, we talk about what happened 50 years from
later,
the events of the book, right? And when he read that, he was like, no. He was so adamant. So you have to credit him, I guess, with the rest of it, because he was more adamant than certainly than me. He was the one who made me see that there was a possibility that there could be maybe something else.
It was a good decision, because then afterwards you wrote the prequel. It was Alexander's parents' story.
Yes.
So that was all a universe, a Bronze Horseman universe.
Yes, because their story of his parents is also so important in understanding where he came from and what it meant. they're if you've read the other two books, you know that they are saved by Alexander's mother. Without her sacrifice, however small it seemed at the time, they wouldn't have been able to get to anywhere. They would have had no hope. So it was, you know, and I really wanted to, she was quite a remarkable character in her own right. And I really wanted to tell her story, that she was once young too, that she wasn't just full of political ideals, that she was once a romantic who fell in love with a man, much like a different man than Alexander, and she was a different woman than Tatiana, but she still was young and full of dreams and full of hopes, and she met a man and she fell in love with him. And because of that, everything else followed, which some of it is not great, but the love was the positive force in her life. I thought that that was a story worth telling.
I'm a little bit curious about the other ending. Could we know the other ending, or it's a secret?
No, it's not a secret. Do you know that I don't know if in Mexico they published my cookbook. Do you know that they published my?
No, I saw it on Amazon, but we don't see it in Mexico, but I saw it on Amazon.
Okay, because in the cookbook I actually write out the other ending.
Oh, wow.
Because let me tell you what happened in the other ending. It's even worse than you think, because I had written the second book as the other ending. So instead of, for example, making it a 6-page epilogue, I made it into a 500-page novel.
Okay.
With the other ending.
Wow.
And it's only when I got to the end of the first draft that I realized that that it was just wrong, that it was just not right, that there was another, I you know what it is, what I felt is that in our life we had already so much struggle, and all of us went to books for something other than struggle. Like, we wanted struggle, but some of it was fantasy, right? Some of it was escape for us. We read books so that we went into another world, but that world couldn't be like our world, just full of, you know, negative things, or full of death, or full of disappointments or disillusion, or full of things that don't work out. I just wanted the fiction part of it to work out. I wanted it to be like a fairy tale, because you know what? Every once in a while, people survive the Holocaust, and then they meet and fall in love, and they get this. People survive all kinds of things, earthquakes, right? And cancer. And so I thought, well, why can't they also make it through? And so I rewrote that second book, and it became, the Tatiana and Alexander that was published and that we all read. But so the end to the other book, I actually wrote as one of the chapters in the cookbook.
And I think it's great. I think it's great
because
we as a reader, we as readers, we love to have this fairy tale between this suffering. You know?
It's because we always get this disagreement. I like the stories that are very real, and I don't like as much the happy ending. And when we discuss the book, when it's a happy ending with rainbows, I don't feel it's true. And she goes, I need the rainbows.
I need that in order to read this. I need the fairy tale.
But I like what you're telling me, that it's true. I cannot read my life. It's very complicated as it is for me to read complicated stories. Now I understand this fantasy, this fiction side. It has to be rainbows.
Right. No, I get it, but it needs to be real, you know, so that's the difficult part, right? Because you don't want to be writing everything like sugary, like you say. It has to feel, the ending, it has to feel true. And sometimes when they sort of tack on to the story of all this strife, right, and they tack on a happy ending, it feels like, oh, isn't that a little so neat? Everything is a little too convenient. But sometimes you need sometimes the person needs to survive a horrible terminal cancer. She just does. I don't know what to tell you. And you don't, in real life, maybe they don't, but that's what we live all the time in real life, right? We live that they don't make it.
That's the story of the girl in Times Square.
Yeah.
I read the book as well, and I was really engaged as well, because I think you as an author know how to have this like cliffhangers or these hooks that makes us read and be really, really feeling.
And my youngest daughter, she just read The Girl in Times Square for the first time last year, and she read it with such involvement, such emotion, and she said, Mom, I just want you to know that I never ever would have forgiven you if you did not give me in the end. I would have never forgiven you. I don't know if I literally told everybody as I was reading it, I said, if my mother doesn't bring this out for me, I don't know if I could ever look at her again. She was so invested, so involved. And truthfully, though, you know, I based part of The Girl in Times Square on a woman that I knew who was my publicist from Australia. And when she was 26 years old, she got terminally ill with leukemia. But she survived, right? And I just thought, okay, well, she makes it out. She didn't have a bone marrow transplant, but she really did have just horrible, horrible things. It was very difficult for her to make it to make it out, but she did make it. Not only did she make it out after all that chemotherapy, but she somehow managed to get pregnant and have a child.
Wow.
Naturally, without help, literally by the traditional method of, you know, sleeping with your husband. And so I thought she had a happy ending. So I thought that it was really, right. And anyway, I certainly in the Bronze Horseman, I've there's so many stories that I myself know, and of people that I knew where people got separated, and that was it. He went here, she was left behind, and they never saw each other again. We, you know, the man who helped us out of Russia, who sponsored us from America, was that man. He escaped from Russia to Finland, through Finland to America, and he left his pregnant wife behind. And he had to leave because she couldn't come with him. And he never saw her again. They never reunited, you know. But for the rest of his life, he had a picture of her on his nightstand. He was, yeah. So every once in a while, you have that, right?
And when you go back to Russia, have you been there lately, or when you
I've
go
only
back,
been there once. Yeah.
do you feel this kind of sorrow, or this, or like this could be my life, but it's not? I have a better life, or this. I don't know. I must think it's really hard.
Right, Fabiola, I want to tell you something. Of course, I don't have it here. So I wrote a book called 6 Days in Leningrad.
Really?
And 6 Days in Leningrad is my memoir of my travel to Russia. I went to Russia in 1998. It was because of that travel to Russia that the Bronze Horseman is possible. It was out of that trip that I wrote the Bronze Horseman. So I didn't know what to expect. It was 25 years since I left. So 25 years later, communism had fallen. This is, you know, like I said, 6-7 years after the Berlin Wall fell. And that trip was really a life-changing trip. It was a very, very painful, awful, terrible trip that because my own life had moved so far away from that Russian life. It was so full of American things, you know. There was a house, there were children, there was marriage, there was travel, there was cars, there was Disney. There was just, I don't know, happiness at that point. At that time, there was a lot of happiness and joy. And when I went back, they were living the same life. They were living in the same apartments. They were living in the same, they still had, our friends, my father's oldest friends, were saying things like, well, yeah, they were telling my dad, who was staying with them, they said, listen, have a shower now, because tomorrow they're turning off the water for 6 weeks, and we're not going to have any water after today. And this is how they were still living like this, like so little had changed in their in their life. And I think it was very affecting in a negative way to see that. It was sad. It was like your own country. It's like if you love your country, and we loved Russia, but when we came back, it was really, really difficult.
You grew apart. You grew apart.
Yes, we did grow apart. We did. But if it wasn't for my dad, we never would have left, and so that was another thing that I thought, what an incredible thing for that man to do, to think that there was another life that was possible elsewhere. I think most immigrants feel that, right? If you leave your homeland, and my dad really believed that a better life could be possible, and no one else did, but he somehow, by the effort of his will, got us out.
There are sacrifices, and they're afraid, and they don't know what to expect, but sometimes they have to take the risk.
Take that chance. Yeah, take that chance. It's very difficult, and it doesn't always work out well. My dad at the time thought that the only way that it could work out better for him, he gave himself one advantage, and that's he learned English. So I know that a lot of immigrants from Russia, when they come to America, they come not knowing English, and that makes it very difficult, because what are you going to do? At least Spanish is so prevalent in America now. It's almost like a second language. But Russian? What are you going to do with Russian?
And it's very different. It's so different.
Yes.
There's
right.
Like Spanish or English. They're not the same, but they're not so different as Russian.
Absolutely. Russian is a different alphabet, right? Different words, different roots of words. So things don't sound the same. Nothing. You can, I don't know necessarily, but if you talk to me in Spanish, I know that I won't understand. But there's a certain thing that you do understand. Whereas in Russian, it's like there's some languages that you just don't understand anything from. Yeah.
Paullina, and just tell us, do you think this will be a movie, a series? Have you thought about that?
We think about this for 20 years. We've been thinking about this. I can't tell you. So I wrote a screenplay. Then I wrote a pilot of a TV series. I tried, we have sold it a number of times for an option, not like a full purchase for someone to make the film, but someone who options it is going to look for somebody to make the film. So we've done that half a dozen times, and it's just something that just hasn't worked out.
That time will come, like the perfect time.
I think it would be great, and I think you need a series, because it's too long for a movie.
Yes, I think, well, either way, you can have a 3-hour film. It could be like Dr. Zhivago. It could be beautiful, but you're definitely not going to have a lot of things in there. But it will be one thing. So when you say, I'm going to go and see the Bronze Horseman, you can then just give yourself 3 hours, and then you can have that story, right? That has meaning too. It's a beginning, middle, and end all in kind of one afternoon, right? But of course, the series would have such an enormous amount of detail, and you could really spend time on, and you could also, I included other things, like I thought you could have other scenes that I didn't include that you could put into the series. There was just so much interesting, maybe, hopefully, well, let's keep our fingers crossed. We're trying to figure out a way to maybe see if we could do some kind of a fan-based groundswell campaign, where maybe if everybody gave like $10, whatever, then we can make a short film or like a trailer. So it could be like a promotional thing for the Bronze Horseman. So we would do like a little short film, say from the first chapter, how they meet or something. And then because some movie makers have done that, where they made like a 15-minute or 10-minute film, and that was the thing that they sold it and then made a full movie out of. So we're like we're working on that. I think it would be too. I agree with you. That would be wonderful, especially with the kind of support, like from international support. Like that would be something that you know, that could do well everywhere in Mexico and South
In
America,
Mexico,
and
your
also
books are very, very popular here.
And I think that there's a lot of
that's really
people,
good.
a lot of people that don't read, but they would
Yes,
see the series or the movie or the saga, whatever you decide to do, because they won't read the book, but they know it's a good book, and they wanna know the story, and they wanna know all the details of the historical context and everything. So I think it's another. I mean, you get both markets, because you have us readers
absolutely.
who read the books, and then you have the other ones that don't read.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And but also, have you ever, I know myself, when I see a movie, let's say, that I really or a series that I really like, all I want is more. And so I immediately go and buy the book. So it would actually be like um you know, a thing that would lift all boats, sort of a thing. A movie would make people who are not necessarily readers run and maybe get the book,
Yeah,
right? And then
exactly.
maybe get the second book and other things. It would expose them, and I think it would be fantastic. What should we do about that?
I don't know.
How do
but
we plan that? Let's develop that.
You should come to Mexico.
Let's do it.
And we should talk, because it's a very good idea.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Yeah. It's really wonderful. But I'm really excited to talk to you. Thank you for reaching out to me.
Thank you.
It was just wonderful for you to reach out to me. Sometimes it's hard to it's hard to say. One time somebody reached out to me like this, Fabiola, and said, "Hey, we would love to interview you for you and your books." And I'm like, "Okay." And after that, they shut down my entire Facebook account for 3 months. It was all a ruse. And so they somehow got into my Facebook and destroyed my
Like a
entire
hacker.
author page. Oh, it was just horrible. But it all started with, "Hey, we love your work. We'd love to talk to you about it." I'm like, "Yes."
That's why I always send, when I contact an author, I always say, Christy and I pictures, our links, our information, because I think
But I
it's,
just knew.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for trusting us.
and agreeing.
Yeah, no, I knew you girls were going to be splendid, and I was right, and it's wonderful. But let me ask you, how do you do this? How do you then show the podcast to your viewers? Do you translate it like at the bottom with? Oh,
Yes,
that's very good.
closed
Oh, that's
caption.
very good.
We upload it to Spotify and YouTube. And Spotify, there's no subtitles, but in YouTube you can see the
And
subtitles.
most of our listeners here in Mexico, and we have listeners in Peru and Costa Rica, they're bilingual. So if they are struggling or something, they go to YouTube and watch the closed caption, but mostly
Amazing.
and they like to read
that's
in
amazing.
English and in Spanish, so you have the
amazing.
the best of both worlds. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well, that's fantastic. Okay,
Well, thank you very much for your time, for your
thank you
trust,
so much.
and we really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much. I
love
really
your
enjoyed
books.
talking to you.
I'm
Thank you
gonna
very
look
much.
for
Thank you so much.
your memoir. I'm gonna look for it. I'm gonna look for your memoir. I will.
Yeah, and then actually, if you wanted to hear it on audiobook, if you could get it, because it's available worldwide, I narrate it.
Oh,
So that
wow,
you could
great.
actually, so you could hear my own voice narrated. So that, anyway, that would be a pleasure. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
It's really a pleasure to meet you. Thank you
You
very
too.
much.
You
Take care.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.